In business today, three things to know. First, USA advances. World Cup fever continues to run high as the Americans move on to the knockout round. We'll run down all the numbers and we'll try to explain how you can lose a game and still advance. Then, sticker shock at the butcher. Why the price of meat is soaring. And it's hardly namaste from the tax man. How Washington, D.C. is taxing yoga. But lawmakers are finding out that those who practice it are no pushovers. Arise Exchange starts now.
USA! USA!
We are all fully on the bandwagon here at Arise Exchange. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. They did it the hard way, but Team USA has made it past the group of death and is headed to the round of 16 at the World Cup. In the rain, they lost to Germany 1-0, but Portugal did beat Ghana, and that was enough for the U.S. to advance. For several hours this afternoon, it was Soccer Nation. Ratings on ESPN outpaced all other television networks. If your colleague wasn't in the office, he or she may have been at the local pub or one of the many outdoor venues set up across the country, Chicago, New York, L.A., they were all over. The president even watched from Air Force One. And if you needed a letter to skip work, the coach for USA, Jurgen Klinsmann, tweeted out this letter before the game to give your boss asking for the afternoon off. Wonder how many people handed it in. All of this is only helping the momentum of the business of soccer. Not surprising, but USA jerseys are the top-selling team jersey in every city except Los Angeles, where Mexico, by the way, is leading, according to the sports retail website Fanatics.com. Host country Brazil is number 2 overall. Fanatics reports that sales of World Cup merchandise in the U.S. are far ahead of the last World Cup in 2010. The U.S.-Germany game was also a match between two of the world's largest sports retailers. The Germans were outfitted by Adidas, a German company. They call it Adidas. And the Americans, of course, were clothed by Nike. So it was a battle between the two of them. Each company spent an estimated $2 million on that sponsorship for the teams. Mike Bako, sports editor of DailyNational.com, is once again with us to talk about today's advancement and what is next. So help me understand the math here, because Business Insider had a good headline. USA wins 0-1. They explain how they win a game, they tie a game, they lose a game, and then they go on.
Well, it's all about the soccer point scoring system. It's not necessarily about the most goals scored. It's about when you score those goals. So the U.S. was able to win by losing today because they got a little help from Portugal, not only today, but in their previous match, their first match of the entire tournament against Germany, when they lost 4-0. So that put them at a severe disadvantage because the World Cup goes to a point differential system. So 3 points for a win, 1 for a tie, and then if teams are equal, they go to goal differential. U.S. was able to come out on top.
Why was this called the group of death?
Because if you just look at the matchups that they had, Portugal with the great Cristiano Ronaldo, you saw what he did against the U.S. to tie the score at 2-2. Germany, top to bottom, great team. And Ghana, not necessarily world-renowned players, but they're a team. They had a great showing in the last 2 World Cups, so they were primed for a good showing this go-around. And they did. They really did have a good showing.
And the next round is single elimination?
Single elimination.
So no more ties?
No more ties. They go to 2 15-minute overtimes, and then they go to a shootout. So we've had actually a couple of World Cups actually decided by shootouts. So it's very dramatic. It's very interesting, even for the most layman of fans. And they're jumping on the bandwagon.
And there's a lot of laymen of fans, because I've never seen this many soccer fans. And that's perfectly understandable. In fact, let's talk about TV ratings for a moment. If you're ESPN, this is a blockbuster.
This is a blockbuster. This is something that Fox, who's looking at the next 2 World Cups in Russia, and if Qatar is able to keep their World Cup in 2022, but they're hoping that this momentum continues. I think the one thing that's really helping ESPN, they're riding the wave of people playing soccer, following soccer, being more interested in MLS here in the United States, EPL overseas, but the time difference is really working to their advantage. Games are being able to go on at 12 o'clock,
it's
3 o'clock, live at 6 o'clock on Sunday.
People
People are not waiting until 9 o'clock at night on Sunday night. They're watching it at 6 o'clock, maybe at the end of the day at a barbecue with their friends, at a beer garden, at a bar. it's perfectly primed for TV ratings.
So, we had on the head of marketing for the MLS a week or so ago, and I asked very clearly is how are you capitalizing on this? Do you think the MLS here, which is the U.S. Professional Soccer League, Major League Soccer, now in its 20th season, I believe, is doing enough to try to grab these fans? Because I don't see the MLS really well presented.
This is where you will see the big drop off. And if they are able to bring in some of those viewers, I think this is where the MLS might actually become the 5th major sport in the U.S. I don't see it happening. In certain pockets, in Seattle, in Portland, the Pacific Northwest, they're really passionate about it. Other markets, Columbus, New Jersey, they sell out their stadiums, but TV ratings year after year, ESPN has those games as well. They're in the toilet. They're not that great. They rival WNBA games, and they're not that great either. So it'll be interesting to see in this next season if they're able to ride this wave. But the play is not as good. The international element is not there. So that's part of what's
driving this is the nationalistic excitement, right?
Absolutely.
And you look at the merchandise sales. How are merchandise sales doing for the major retailers out of this?
They're terrific. You mentioned Fanatics.com said that they're way outpacing 2010. Fanatics.com also reported that in the first day of World Cup action, it completely outstripped 2010. So that's great. There are a lot of overstocked Landon Donovan jerseys because he did not make the team. So you could probably get those at a discount. But people buying Tim Howard jerseys, Clint Dempsey jerseys.
I was up at upper 90, on the Upper West Side, and sold out. They just really basically were lucky because it's been such a big success.
And anytime you could watch games in a communal atmosphere, you don't want to show up wearing a shirt and a tie or a polo. You want to wear the garb of what's going on.
Well, that USA jersey, I went out there and bought one for the 2 times I've worn it.
There you go.
Mike Bako, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next game is on Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay. Mike Bako, thank you so much. We'll have you back next week. Turning to the market and economic news, weekly jobless claims fell last week by 2,000 to a seasonally adjusted 312,000. And a key indicator the Fed looks at for inflation came in as expected, the core PCE, which measures prices consumers pay for goods, excluding food and energy, though we do buy those things, I'm told, rose 1.5%. You'll recall that our frequent guest, Brian Jacobson, said yesterday that the Fed looks very closely at that number. Stocks declined here on Thursday. Let's take a look at the final numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closing down 2138 to 16,846. The S&P 500 back to 31. And the Nasdaq pulling back just a fraction to 43.7905. Some of the stocks we're watching today, the camera company that's loved by adventure seekers, GoPro, began trading on the Nasdaq today, priced at $24 a share. GoPro closed up $31.35, a nice 30% pop on the first day of trading. Alcoa, the third largest producer of aluminum, delving deeper into the aerospace industry by acquiring the British jet engine component company Firth Rixson for nearly $3 billion. Alcoa closing at $14.94. And Barclays is being sued by the New York Attorney General's office over allegations of fraudulent dark pools trading practices. The New York AG accuses Barclays of securing better deals for its own portfolio, despite promises to treat their customers' stock options equally. Barclays stock down more than 7% today to $14.55. And a look at commodities. Gold closing at $1,317 down, and oil back 88 cents. Sam Stovall is chief equity strategist with S&P Capital IQ to talk about the latest economic news and some of these numbers. Sam, welcome back to Arise Exchange. Let's start a little bit with what we got yesterday with the revised gross domestic product for the first quarter, down about 2.9%. What's called a disastrous first quarter. Your views of that number and how relevant it is going forward?
Well, I think it certainly is a surprise, especially in the beginning of the year. Expectation was that we would see more than a 2% rise in the first quarter. But once we really saw how hard the U.S. was hammered by winter weather, then the expectation was something along the lines of 1%. It came in at 0.1. And then with each revision, it ended up getting lower and lower to the point now where we're looking at almost a 3% decline. But I think that's ancient history. Most people on Wall Street today are looking at additional economic data and are hoping that the second quarter ends up with a 3.9% advance.
A 3.9% advance is what you're calling for.
Exactly. So, and the street is looking for something closer to about 3.5%, but certainly a much bigger bounce in the second quarter than what was expected in the first.
And we dug ourselves a pretty big hole in the first quarter, so we discounted a little bit. But there was one real number that's important there, and that is healthcare. That really got hit in the first quarter. How much could that translate into the next 3 quarters of being a drag on the economy?
Well, I think the expectations are that most of the recovery is going to be seen from the consumer's perspective. Yes, we probably see a bounce back with healthcare as well. Capital expenditures are likely to be one of the biggest areas of growth most of the people are anticipating. So despite the strong growth in the second quarter, it's not going to be stealing from the third and fourth quarter, in our opinion. Probably end up seeing 3.3% gain in each one of those quarters as well.
As for the inflation numbers, is these the numbers that the Fed is looking at? I mean, there is one number in there, personal income, rising a little bit. Does that mean there's a sign of some wage pressure, which is a key indicator of inflation?
Very minor at this point, with the unemployment rate still at 6.3% and probably not likely to be trading below 6% until much later this year by our estimates. That 1.5% year over year for the PCE, I think it still indicates that the Fed is happy that it's heading higher and getting closer to its target of 2%. But really don't take a look at the CPI, which is at 2.1. Most of the Fed watchers are focusing more on the PCE, personal consumption expenditure.
That's the number that we keep hearing. Okay, so all of this translates a little bit into some positive territory for the equity markets. The S&P 500, trading in record territory a good part of the year. Do you expect that to continue through the summer?
I'm a little bit nervous. I think that, I know that we've gone 33 months without a decline of 10% or more. Average since World War II is 18 months. So I think that corrections can be delayed, but they'll never be repealed. I think certainly that we are likely to be digesting some of these gains, but we will probably still end up with a good return for all of this year. And that would be consistent with history as well, where we end up with a digestion, but still end up in high single-digit growth environment.
Sam, what are the key indicators we should look at then if we can start seeing a correction coming? If there's something out there on the horizon that gives you a little bit of an indicator of it?
Well, I think the big worry is that maybe we start to find out that second quarter numbers, and they will be reported on July 31st, will end up being weaker than anticipated, whether it's the street estimate at 3.5% that ends up being shortchanged. That could be a concern, or maybe the short shrift we're giving now in terms of inflationary growth. If that starts to spike, then I think people will be concerned, because today James Bullard from the St. Louis Fed indicated that Fed might start to raise interest rates in March of next year, and I think that caused a bit of concern on Wall Street.
So basically looking at economic fundamentals then, more so than corporate earnings news, for example.
Right now, that's correct. So inflation and interest rates are the two drivers, in my opinion.
Okay, Sam Stovall, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Coming up, why your 4th of July barbecue is going to cost more. You're watching Arise Exchange.
If I was building my own news network, first thing I think I'd want high-quality reporters, very educated, intelligent people.
Hello, I'm Francesca Maxime.
I'm Julian Phillips.
I'm Wendy Gillette.
I'm Sophia Songhai.
I'm Gary Anthony Ramsey. Thank you for joining us here in New York City.
I would like to see more people of color represented in high positions in media.
We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well.
People need to understand the problems that are going on in the community are much closer than we actually think they are.
Kayla Phillips is one of the shoppers who is suing Barney's, and she is here with her attorney. What is it that you want from them?
Not to judge every African-American person that comes in your store.
Welcome back to Arise Exchange. Time now for our business ticker, stories making headlines across the nation. The U.S. Supreme Court has tossed out President Obama's recess appointments to the National Labor Relations Board. The administration and Congress were at odds over vacancies on the board, so the president went ahead and made appointments when Congress was technically not in session. The court ruled unanimously that the president's moves were unconstitutional. The NLRB hears disputes between unions and companies. Recalls for General Motors aren't done yet. The automaker is halting the sale of 33,000 of its most popular Chevy Cruze sedans, years 2013 and 2014, because of a potential problem with the airbags. The faulty airbags were made by Takata, the same manufacturer of the defective airbags recalled by Honda and other car makers earlier this week. GM CEO Mary Barra also said that there may be more recalls as GM continues to review its safety records. The company has already recalled over 20 million cars globally this year. Argentina, which has been stuck in a battle with a pair of hedge funds, is now warning it could default on its debt. Deborah Luchterbach has this report.
Argentina's economy minister Axel Kicillof is warning the UN that his country is on the brink. He says Argentina is being pushed toward a new default after a U.S. Supreme Court decision favored holdout creditors seeking payment on bonds Argentina defaulted on in 2001 and 2.
Probablemente eso nos empuje un default técnico.
Probably this is going to push us into a technical default. Whatever way you look at it, this ruling is forcing Argentina toward the risk of economic crisis. It's pushing out people into the situation of a debt that was double what we had in 2001.
No es de nuevo un 2001 para la República Argentina.
Argentine officials have said the country will not pay these investors, arguing it could face potential demands for up to $15 billion from others not involved with the case, an amount representing more than half of the government's $28.5 billion in foreign currency reserves.
Argentina paid and wants to continue paying under reasonable conditions, under feasible conditions, but we're facing a situation where we're not being allowed to do that. Just 1% are endangering the agreement that was agreed upon by all other bondholders.
Prácticamente la unanimidad de los demás bonistas. Muchas gracias.
Despite the tough public stance, markets believe the parties will eventually negotiate a solution.
Argentina's debt payments in foreign currency will rise to $9.4 billion next year, $6 billion of which is due in October. IKEA, the world's largest furniture retailer, is raising the minimum wage of thousands of its workers here in the U.S. About half of the company's 11,000 hourly store employees will get a raise based on the cost of living in each location. The increase translates to an average wage of $10.76 an hour, and that will take place on January 1st. And there is a huge shift going on in U.S. demographics leading to a big change in who is buying homes. According to a new study by the Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard University, minorities will account for more than 1/3 of U.S. households by 2025 and make up nearly half of all first-time home buyers. If you haven't already noticed, barbecuing this year is costing you a lot more than usual. That's because meat prices are at their peak since 2009 due to a major cattle crisis. John Anderson is Deputy Chief Economist with the American Farm Bureau Federation, and he joins us from Washington, D.C. with more. John, welcome to Arise Exchange.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So, we're talking about inflation, and they take the price of food out of those inflation numbers, but food is going up. What is driving meat prices?
Well, you're right. Food prices are going up, and a lot of the increase in food prices, if you look in the CPI index, a lot of that really is what's going on with meat and also dairy and egg products. But really what we're seeing is we've had several years of declining numbers in both cattle and also hogs. And so we've got a fairly tight supply right now of those two products. And at the same time, demand is really good, not just in the U.S., but also globally.
Yeah, well, let me ask you about supply first. Why is the supply going down? Now, I know a lot of farms have been taken sort of out of the capacity because the farmlands and farms have failed in the past. But why capacity going down?
Well, it goes back several years. If you look back over the last 5 or 6 years, we've had fairly high feed prices. And in some key areas of the country, particularly the southern plains, Texas, Oklahoma, we've had 2 or 3 years of very severe drought. That's forced people to reduce their cattle numbers, and that's showing up in tighter supplies.
And the good news, though, let's talk about demand. Beef is really back on the American table. We are seeing a resurgence of hamburgers, for example, over the health concerns sort of going away. What kind of demand are you seeing? Are you surprised by the increase in that demand?
I am a little surprised because we do, as you said, we have record prices for the product, but consumers do continue to get out there and buy the product. We're also seeing a strong foreign component to the demand, but I think it really speaks to the quality of the product that's being produced. We do have, I think, from the U.S. beef industry, a really great product. It's something that people do like. It's something that's very traditional for Americans, and I think also, as we've seen the economy improve some over the last year or so, obviously first quarter numbers weren't great, but in general things have gotten a little better, and people have been a little more willing to spend on that high quality product, and it's been a good time for demand.
I want to ask you about the drought in the western U.S. It has been devastating this year. What have been the impact, and do you see sort of it turning around a little bit?
Honestly, I don't see it turning around much yet. If you look at the most recent drought indicators that are put together by USDA and National Weather Service, it still looks really bad in the western United States, particularly California and Nevada. It's had devastating local effects. We've had a lot of farms are having difficulty with water. A lot of livestock have had to be moved, relocated, sold. So it's been a tough situation locally. I don't think it's had a huge effect on the national market yet, particularly not the meat market. But in that local area in California, Nevada, the localized effects have been very dramatic and are ongoing.
Okay, and we'll have to see if that starts to spread nationwide. John Anderson with the American Farm Bureau Federation from Washington. Thank you.
Good to be here.
Ahead, traffic anxiety makes one woman our favorite person of the day. You're watching Arise Exchange.
The great thing about Arise Entertainment 360 is that we cover the 360 of entertainment, food, fashion, lifestyle, culture. We're able to cover it all. And the thing I love most about the show is we're able to do a stunning combination of high and low. So we can talk about Rihanna on the red carpet, but we can also speak about high art with people like Sanford Biggers and Hank Willis. We actually spend quality time with our guests, and we really get to know them. It's really intriguing because we get a 360 look at our guests.
Arise serves underserved communities by bringing them news, information, sports, and entertainment from places that are becoming part of the world economy, that are becoming a part of the world voice, and decisions that are affecting things in the world that people care about. They care about the economy. They care about safety and security. And if you come to Arise and you watch our broadcast, these are the things we're going to bring to you every day, 24 hours a day.
Time for Liquid Lunch, probably an increase of that due to the World Cup today, and we have a World Cup story for you here. Ghana was so worried that its team would strike and not show up to the game versus Portugal today that the government flew in $3 million in cash. It seems the players and the government were at odds over how they would be paid. Ghana wanted it to use a form of e-banking, like PayPal or something. The players, however, demanded cash, U.S. dollars. So Ghana chartered a private plane and filled it with $3 million. And the president personally intervened to ensure that the players get paid. They then subsequently lost to Portugal. Time now for our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention and not for the right reasons. Today, it is a New Jersey woman who is suing her former employer because she claims driving to work stressed her out. Andrea De Girolamo claims that driving on New Jersey's busy roads caused her severe anxiety. She asked her then employer, Fulton Financial, to change her work schedule so she could avoid rush hour traffic. Her boss agreed, but it's alleged downgraded her responsibilities to clerical work. And then she says she was fired when she claimed that rush hour traffic anxiety is a disability. She's now suing, saying the company violated the law. Johnny, you drive in from New Jersey. You're not going to sue us, are you?
You're going to lose.
In the lawsuit, De Girolamo says, quote, she was especially aggravated by crowded roadways experienced during heavy traffic. So she even got a doctor's note saying she needed to come to work after morning rush ended and leave before afternoon rush hour began. In New Jersey, that pretty much means showing up to work at noon and leaving at 2. And so Andrea De Girolamo is our favorite person of the day. Coming up next, why you may need to pay a tax during your next downward dog. You're watching Arise Exchange.
Looking at mainstream news stations where only you have a a very small minority of people of color being newscasters and actually having prominent roles in the media.
In a newsroom in the United States, maybe 10% of decision makers come from communities of diversity. That's not right.
Well, diversity is important because the more complete the news is, the more accurate a picture you're getting of the world, and the more you can form an accurate opinion of things.
The vision here is not just to tell the main stories of the day, but to tell the news that other organizations don't tell, and tell it in a way that people like me, people that look like me, that look like you, are interested in.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News. Arise News, every culture, every angle.
This week, the Washington, D.C. City Council passed a 5.75% tax hike on gym memberships and yoga classes. The tax is expected to raise $5 million as part of a large restructuring of the D.C. tax system that includes some $143 million in tax cuts. This wellness, or yoga tax, as it has been dubbed, has sparked a number of protests, and our Washington, D.C. Bureau Chief James Blue has more from the nation's capital. James, what did the Washington City Council do today? Explain this tax.
Well, you know, basically what they've done is to try to give the D.C. residents a big tax break. But in order to pay for it, they need about $5 million. And one of the places they decided to tax was gym memberships, yoga lessons, fitness classes, personal trainers, all of those sort of intimate, personal fitness items that we've all sort of paid for will now have a 5.75% tax attached to it.
How's the plan to tax your yoga instructor? How are they going to collect on that?
Well, it's going to be collected at the point where you pay for service. And so all of these sort of independent contractors who run these yoga studios are now going to have to start filing with the D.C. tax authority to pay the additional 5.75%.
And a lot of yoga instructors are sort of part-time. Do you know how hard it is to collect sales tax?
Yeah, sales tax is a particularly difficult tax to collect because it requires so much movement of funds back and forth and a lot of record keeping. And, you know, you might decide you need to go to a yoga class after filling out all those forms.
It's certainly going to increase the stress on everybody taking the class and giving the the class. Now you're going to have to collect tax on it. So now this has caused a lot of attention in the national media, and they're focusing on it as a yoga tax, of course. A lot of people who practice yoga are relatively politically powerful, aren't they? And the City Council has been getting an earful on this.
The City Council has been getting an earful. There was a bill that was put in just this week trying to revoke the wellness or yoga tax. It did not pass. And so the bill is sitting on the desk of the current mayor who lost the primary, won't be running again. He's opposed to the tax, but there's some sense that he's going to go ahead and sign it. Look, the headline here, there's a major tax deal that's going to reduce taxes to most residents of the District of Columbia, where there are very high taxes.
That's right. And so you think there's, and part of the reason there's high taxes in Washington, we should say, is that all the government buildings, federal government buildings, don't pay taxes. And a lot of the wealthy people don't live in Washington, D.C. So it is true the district has a problem and Congress does not fund it properly.
That's right. And so the taxes have been high, and so the council chair really thought that this was a way to create a win for everyone. But clearly the yoga bunnies and the yummy mummies aren't very happy.
And, you know, also philosophically, we tax sins. We tax tobacco. We tax alcohol. Is it really a great idea, and is part of the opposition here, that we shouldn't tax healthy initiatives, even though some in Washington, I know, think that yoga is satanic? The bulk of people think it's a pretty healthy thing to do.
Yeah, no, I think it is difficult because it isn't a sin. Actually, yoga is something that's quite good for you. And as the practitioners say, you don't tax the doctor giving a pill to a patient. Yeah. You know, it's the same type of sort of treatment, quote unquote. But my sense is the tax is going to go into effect. It will be very difficult to regulate and for people to comply. and they'll figure out where to get that $5 million from somewhere else.
Finally, James, in 20 seconds left, what was the mood in Washington, D.C. as Team USA played Portugal?
It was ecstatic. DuPont Circle was filled with people, and there were 2 big screens up. I've never seen so much support for soccer, and having lived in the UK for several years, we're gaining on them.
Yeah, we are. They played Germany, of course. James Wu, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tomorrow on Arise Exchange, the Bitcoin craze, how the U.S. government plans to auction off millions of dollars worth of the electronic currency. You know who is the largest holder of Bitcoins? The U.S. government. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Thanks for watching Arise Exchange.